Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Duke, and this is going to be a partial lecture on critical race theory. Ordinarily, this would take me about a couple hours to do, but I'm going to give you a 1-hour version, try to hit the highlights. Critical race theory and why it's a problem. Critical race theory is a problem because it starts from a dangerous, progressive, socialist premise, and that premise is that this country is so racist that anybody who's not white can't succeed. That our structures, our history, our founding fathers, our documents, all of it is so systemically racist that only white people can get ahead, and all white people therefore participate in white supremacy. It's garbage, it's nonsense, it's racism. We are judging white folk by the color of their skin. If you're white, you're a bigot. If you're white, you're complicit in structural racism. If you are not white, you are a victim. That's also racist. It's even a worse form of racism. If you're a minority, you are a victim with no agency and you can't get ahead. This has to be squashed. We are segregating and discriminating and bringing racism back, progressives, into our public schools, judging white kids and non-white kids differently simply because of the color of their skin. Now, I think you know why we have to stop that. Take a look at this short video, and I want you to see how many people who are not white, who are helping white people, protest critical race theory. In other words, minorities are as outraged by this as are white moms and dads. Watch.
Stop indoctrinating our children.
A Loudoun County parent and former spokesman for the Trump Justice Department says a group of parents from his organization, Loudoun Parents for Education, have been threatened for opposing critical race theory. It's a set of ideas that law and institutions are inherently racist.
Now you have kids not liking their own parents. You have black kids that are now racist against their peers. We never saw that. You all went down a road because of what you see nationally.
The young people we witnessed rioting and looting in some of our largest cities came out of an education system that had taught them to hate America.
CRT is racist, it is abusive, it discriminates against one's color. Let me educate you. An honest dialogue does not oppress. An honest dialogue does not implement hatred or injustice. You cannot tell me what is or is not racist. Look at me.
Now the same school district wants to threaten to fire teachers who do not agree with a critical race theory. You are the face of privilege.
School board, I quit. I quit your policies, I quit your trainings, and I quit being a cog in a machine that tells me to push highly politicized agendas on our most vulnerable constituents, the children.
Because my right to critique your fascism, which is what this is constitutionally protected. There are emails, public record emails, in which the Director of Equity is lobbying and advocating for public comment to be censored in this school district.
You gonna deliberately teach kids this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You gonna personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed? How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed?
There are political signs all over RHS, about specific races that matter, specific sexual orientations that matter, and specific perspectives that matter. When I asked why that was, they told me, quote, whites have a pretty good situation right now, unquote.
I was told 2 weeks ago at this very meeting spot, no politics in school. I said there should be no BLM in schools, period. Does not matter the color you make the posters and the font you use. We all understand the meaning.
Growing up in South China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race.
We have social justice warrior so-called teachers are trying to shove their garbage ideology down our kids' throat. These are our children, not yours.
And who are you to educate my children, or any of our children, in life issues? That's our job.
Yes.
Your job is to teach them math and science.
Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support.
This is poisonous, this is toxic. We cannot allow this to continue. I know it's going on in mainstream media. I know it's in the sports. But there's millions who disagree.
Doesn't matter if you're black, white, brown, yellow. right?
Black.
And how we treat people is based on who they are and not what color they are.
And if they're nice and smart.
See, this is how children think right here. Critical race theory wants to end that. Not with my children. It's not gonna happen. My baby's gonna know that no matter what she wants to be in life, all she has to do is work hard, and she can become that.
I have 48 hours, more than 48 hours, of moms and dads of every race, every color, every sexuality, fighting shoulder to shoulder against this garbage. We have to fix this. And so what I'm going to show you now for the next 30 minutes is going to be a number of reasons from black intellectuals why this is a problem. You need to understand this point, that critical race theory and its racism is already being called out by non-white peoples. And so if we understand this, America is not a structurally racist country. We are not a systemically racist country. We, in fact, are one of the least discriminating countries in the history of the world. We are the most diverse country in the history of the world. We will begin to see that critical race theory is not about race. It's about using race to undo this country and to destroy its constitution, its way of life, and replace it with socialism. End of story. I'm going to show you how that works. Take first my favorite intellectual in the sphere right now. That is Thomas Sowell. I think he's the greatest living economist and was certainly one of the most famous. And he's been warning you about this for a long time. As early as 2024, Sowell said, "Ours may become the first civilization destroyed, not by the power of our enemies, but by the ignorance of our teachers and the dangerous nonsense they are teaching our children. In an age of artificial intelligence, the teachers are teaching artificial stupidity." He's right. If you're teaching children not that 2 + 2 = 5, if you're teaching children that math is subjective, not objective. If you're teaching children there are 73 different genders, but male and female don't exist, you are doing exactly what Thomas Sowell is warning you about. Has nothing to do with the color of anybody's skin. It's about power. Shelby Steele, my favorite historian of African American culture, one of the foremost experts on the slave times in American history. Here's what he says powerfully on Fox News.
We are as free as you can possibly be free. We have enjoyed freedom now for some 50 or so years. Our problem has been a lack of development. This is not a systemically racist society. It is a systemically goodwill toward black people society. The people in this country are rooting for us. They're not holding us back. They want us to do well.
Exactly right. We are not taking care of our opportunities in this country as African Americans. We are not being held under anybody's bootstrap. What he said there is powerful. We are not a systemically racist culture. We are a culture that has goodwill, not just to African Americans, but to all minorities. I get it. There are still pockets of racism. There are still individual bigots, many of them on the left, by the way. But that doesn't stop anybody from becoming president like Barack Obama. Doesn't stop anybody from running companies like BET. Doesn't stop anybody from getting an education. Steele is right. Black scholars. We have a number of black professors who wrote an open letter condemning critical race theory. African American intellectuals, a group of black scholars penned an open letter to the National School Board Association, urging them to drop curriculum inspired by critical race theory. 21 black scholars said that critical race theory and the narrative of racial grievance is having a damaging effect on low-income and minority kids. This is typical progressivism. You argue we have to change everything to help minorities. Every educational initiative the progressives have introduced in the last 70 years, every one of them has made the gap between white and Asian kids much deeper than with black and Hispanic kids. All this social change for the left has not helped black kids. It's held them down. It's got to be an alternative reason, right? It's not about race. It's about changing this country. Take a look at this. Kindergartens, this kind of garbage for 5-year-olds. Kindergartners forced to march and chant for Black Lives Matter. A forced march by children holding signs that they can't read, uttering slogans that they don't understand. This is not about racial equity or harmony. It's about indoctrination, forcing children to commit to an ideology, Black Lives Matter, that is founded by two Marxists who were trained by underground weather Marxists. This is absolutely true. This is about sociological change and using babies. Because you can't argue the truth of what they're telling you. You have to embed it in the minds of children too young to know better. Back to one of my heroes, Thomas Sowell. Quote, "Blacks were not enslaved because they were black, but because they were available. Slavery has existed in the world for thousands of years. Whites enslaved other whites in Europe for centuries before the first black was brought to this country, to the Western Hemisphere. Asians enslaved Europeans. Asians enslaved other Asians. Africans enslaved other Africans. And indeed, even today in North Africa, blacks continue to enslave blacks." He is telling you the truth. Slavery is a universal problem, not an American problem. My university kids overwhelmingly believe that slavery was invented by America and was only an American and a Western problem. This is how you convince children to hate people who look different from them simply because of the color of their skin. This is utterly unproductive. We move forward. How about this book? Read to 5-year-old and 6-year-old children in schools across the country. It's a book called Not My Idea. It's about how being white is being evil.
Whiteness is a bad deal. It always was. All right, here's a contract binding you to whiteness. You get stolen land, stolen riches, special favors, and then there's a little footnote that says land, riches, and favors may be revoked at any time for any reason. Whiteness gets to mess endlessly with the lives of your friends, neighbors, loved ones, and all fellow humans of color for the purpose of profit. The only price is your soul. Sign below. Dude, we can see your pointy tail. Yeah, who do you think is trying to make this deal? Not an angel.
So, white progressive men are allowed to tell children that whiteness is an evil. And notice who the evil person is. Behind that list of all the evil things white people do, there's a $20 bill and somebody in a business suit with flame orange hair and a tail. That is both the devil and, of course, that is Donald Trump. And notice how this works. Whiteness is a problem. If you are telling children that the very color of their skin is complicit in racism and colonialism and stealing people's land, then what about all the black people who have done it to other black people? What about the Hispanics who've done it to Hispanics? What about the Mexicans who took land from the natives, the native indigenous Mexicans? What about across the world, Asians enslaving other people like they've got 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in prison camps in China right now? Notice it's only white people who are capable of this kind of behavior, and that's the bigotry, that's the racism. Thomas Sowell once again. The word racism is like ketchup. It can be put on practically anything, and demanding evidence makes you a racist. There's the racism. They tell our children all these lies, and when you dare to question the lies, you're a racist. See what I'm telling you here, move forward. Take a listen to this individual, African-American in North Carolina. Listen to his speech here because he tells the truth of black experience. But you'll never hear men like this on even Fox News. You won't hear them on the mainstream media. This is why so many minorities are helping fight this. Listen to this testimony.
I'm biracial, I'm bilingual, I'm multicultural. The fact is, in America, in North Carolina, I can do anything I want, and I teach that to my children. And the person who tells my little pecan-colored kids that they're somehow oppressed based on the color of their skin would be absolutely wrong and absolutely at war with me. And I think that's the same for every parent. What the mask showed us is that the parents, the most powerful group of people in our country, that they're taking back the wheel. Now, obviously, we had to take the wheel back for the mask, but we're taking the wheel back from Washington all the way to Raleigh and into our local school board. Because CRT, all of that, the parents don't want it. It's a big fat lie. There's not one, if you believe in CRT, I want to tell you you're a liar, because that means you look at your black neighbor and say that they're oppressed, and you look at your white neighbor and say that they're evil, regardless of the experience that you've had with them. And we're not going to do that. The parents in the United States of America right here in North Carolina and Cabarrus County, we know that's not true because we believe the lives we live. The fact is, I've been a business owner right here in North Carolina, and I deal with white people, black people, Hispanic people. My children deal with everybody. And the racism is only happening at the government level and on the media. The fact is, you have racists, and you can't even find them hardly. You just hear the stories about them. But this is what we're dealing with. The parents are taking the wheel. I have an 8-year-old who is absolutely dynamic, who can do anything. Athletically, intellectually, spiritually, and emotionally, she is a dynamo. And I don't want a man swimming against her in the pool. The fact is, I don't want her playing against boys in soccer. I don't even let my sons rough her up. Do you think I'm going to let your son rough her up? This is what we're talking about. Policy going back to the parents. Because if you think people who love America are willing to fight for it, you haven't met parents yet.
There's your antidote to critical race theory: common sense, honesty. This young African-American father, as I said, is not listened to by anybody. His voice has been marginalized and silenced and canceled by the very liberals who are forced, white liberal males like the one we just said, who are indoctrinating your children to hate people who look like them stunningly, because this is their politics, right? Move forward. This next testimony is absolutely gripping. Listen to how we fight critical race theory and how African-American people are telling us how to do it.
I am the direct descendant of the North American slave trade. Both my parents are black, all 4 of my grandparents are black, all 8 of my great-great-grandparents, all 16 of my great-greats. On my mother's side, my ancestors were enslaved in Alabama. On my father's side, we were enslaved in Texas. I am not oppressed. I'm not oppressed, and I'm not a victim. I'm neither oppressed nor a victim. I travel all across this country of ours, and I check into hotels, and I fly commercially, and I walk into retail establishments, and I order food in restaurants. I go wherever I want, whenever I want. I am treated with kindness, dignity, and respect, literally from coast to coast. I have 3 children. They are not oppressed either, although they are victims. I've taught my children they are victims of 3 things: their own ignorance, their own laziness, and their own poor decision making. That is all. My children, we are not victims of America. We are not victims of some unseen 190-year-old force that kind of floats around in the ether. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is taking our nation in the wrong direction. Racism in America would by and large be dead today if it were not for certain people and institutions keeping it on life support. And sadly, very sadly, one of those institutions is the American education system. I can think of nothing more damaging to a society than to tell a baby born today that she has grievances against another baby born today simply because of what their ancestors may have done 2 centuries ago. There is simply no point in doing that to our children, and putting critical race theory into our classrooms in part does that. Putting critical race theory into our classrooms is not combating racism. It's fanning the flames of what little embers are left. I encourage you to support this resolution. Let racism die the death it deserves, and let's keep living the life of the country that we are. Thank you.
You heard him. Racism in this country would be all but dead if it weren't for organizations who keeping it on life support. One of those organizations is the American public school system. They're resurrecting racism, pointing it at different colored people now, but using your kids as pawns in this game. Racism would be all but obliterated in this country if progressives didn't need it to gin up social disharmony. Take this advice from a woman who grew up in China when Chairman Mao, was radically transforming that culture away from freedom and towards socialism and communism. What's been going on in the streets of America the last couple of summers, it's exactly what happened in China. Listen to her very serious warning about where our public schools are taking us.
I've been very alarmed about what's going on in our school. You are now training our children to be social justice warriors and to loathe our country and our history. Growing up in Mao's China, all this seemed very familiar. The communist regime used the same critical theory to divide people. The only difference is they use class instead of race. During the Cultural Revolution, I witnessed students and teachers turn against each other. We changed school names to be politically correct. We were taught to denounce our heritage. The Red Guards destroy anything that is not communist, old statues, books, and anything else. We are also encouraged to report on each other, just like the Student Equity Ambassador Program and the bias reporting system. This is indeed the American version of the Chinese Cultural Revolution. The critical race theory has its roots in cultural Marxism. It should have no place in our schools.
As you could hear, she made my point for me. This is exactly how China became communist. But in China, one of the least diverse countries in the history of the world. Think about how we play up to China in this country, how the left uses them as a model of governance, how they handled the Wuhan virus, all that stuff. This is the same China who built the biggest wall in human history to keep people out who look different. And yet our border wall attempt is evil. This is how creepy this culture has become as far as the progressive left is concerned. But what she told you is absolutely true. In China, they couldn't use race against each other to promote socialism because there was very little diversity. They used class to do it. In your country today, they're using race to do exactly what Chairman Mao did in China. They're racializing your kids. Thomas Sowell again. Many on the political left are so entranced by the beauty of their vision that they cannot see the ugly reality they are creating in the real world. This is a commentary from Professor Sowell about socialism, utopian socialism. Give us all your power, your wealth, give us all your freedom, and we will make you happy. His commentary here is brilliant. The left is so high and stoned on the fake promises of communism that they're willing to destroy everything in real time. That's what we're seeing in your public schools. In fact, I'm going to prove this to you. If indeed this was all about race, then the one subject we should be teaching our kids is math, because math is purely non-racial. Numbers do not have a color. Math is a universal language. As a matter of fact, one medieval philosopher once argued, if God was only allowed to speak one language, just one, he would speak the language of math, because it is so precise, no one could misunderstand it. If the progressive left really wanted to educate kids in a completely a race sort of a way, you teach them math. But no, the progressive left is coming for math, calling math racist. Take a look at the video here, the slide here. According to a Kentucky training program for teachers, math is not only racist, but it also perpetuates curricular violence. Yes, you heard that right. According to critical race theory teachers, teaching math to children is a form of violence. Math is not only racist, but it also perpetuates curricular violence, according to the Jefferson County Public School District in Louisville, Kentucky. To combat the alleged curricular violence that comes from math, the county is hosting a year-long professional training program, mandatory, on anti-racist math. Right? How do we teach math in a non-racist manner? Well, the answer is you teach math, but not to these lefties. Here's the quote. The program's goal is to eliminate curricular violence and innovate mathematics education through anti-bias, anti-racist, and racially equitable practices. Educators will engage in monthly sessions with Latifa Id-Din, an assistant professor of math education at Kennesaw State University, not a mathematician, but a theorist educationally of math. And so we're going to have to move forward to make math not racist. Take a look at another example of this. By the way, dozens of state math programs are based on programs like this, where the purpose of math is not math and math achievement, but using math to attain the goals of critical race theory. Take this example here. Earlier in 2021, The Oregon Department of Education promoted a program for teachers that sought to, quote, dismantle racism in mathematics, unquote, alleging that focusing on finding the right answer in math, asking kids to get the right answer, that is a symbol of white supremacy, along with equally white supremacist concepts like perfectionism, objectivity, and individualism. Let me repeat that. You are a white supremacist. Math is racist if you ask kids to get the right answer. Why? Because in this culture, more African American kids don't get the right answer than Asian kids do. So therefore, math discriminates against black kids. Seriously, ignore the right answer. If everybody gets the wrong answer, they get points for it. You may remember the aspects of this that come from Common Core, when they argued that 2 and 2 plus 2 might indeed be 5. If what you're looking for is equity, not math, then 2 plus 2 equals broccoli is just as good as 2 plus 2 equals 4, especially if it's minority kids who've got the wrong answer. We've got to get them credit for it. In fact, go a little further. Not only is math racism, but look, other constructs that they call. If you believe in perfectionism, if you believe in objectivity, facts, and if you believe in individualism, you're a racist. Now let that sink in for a second. If objectivity is not true, it doesn't exist, then even science itself is racist. And I love this, individualism. If you believe in the individual, not the collective, you're a bigot. And by the way, what does perfectionism, objectivity, individualism, the right answer in math, what does any of that have to do with race? And the answer is nothing. You see what I'm telling you? This is a perfect example. Math is racist and violent because most kids don't like it, and minority kids in particular struggle with it. Therefore, it is violence. Right answers have to go to make kids feel better about math. Look at the last paragraph here. Objectivity is described in this program as the belief, not the fact, that there is such things as being objective or neutral. The program also encourages teachers not to focus on a single correct answer, but to come up with at least 2 answers that might solve the problem. Literally, that's a quote. If 2 plus 2 equals 4, you must accept another answer to that, or else you're a bigot. Seriously. The purpose of this program is to ask instructors to use ethnomathematics to identify and challenge the ways that math is used to uphold capitalist, imperialist, and racist views. They just gave away the game. The real problem with math is not race, because there are brilliant math students who are black, and there are lousy math students who are white. It's not about race. But notice what else they list here. Capitalism and imperialism. This is an attack on free market capitalism. It's an attack on democracy and Republican forms of government. It has nothing to do with math, other than the fact that they're changing everything and ignoring achievement in the name of this quasi-socialist garbage. And you go a little further. This is the governor of Oregon, at least last year she was, and she has suspended all high school graduation standards to make equitable rules for students of color. So with juniors and seniors, graduating seniors, we're not going to test them, we're not going to measure them, we're not going to make sure that the seniors can read and write or do math, because when we do that, if we look to see if we actually educated them, we will find that less minority students are prepared than non-white ones. And that's not fair. So our answer is to stop testing them at all. Here's from the story. In July 2021, Oregon Governor Kate Brown, a Democrat, of course, and the sister of Moonbeam, Jerry Brown in California. In 2021, Kate Brown signed a bill suspending all proficiency requirements for high school graduates for the next 5 years. A spokesman said that by suspending all proficiency requirements, that would aid the state's minority population. Yeah, of course. By not testing kids who would fail, you're not going to have to fail them. So kids who can't read and do math now get diplomas simply because not to give them diplomas is racist. Stunning. In February, the Oregon Department of Education sent a guide to all educators claiming, listen to this is a quote, right, that asking students to show their work in math is an example of white supremacy. So if you ask kids to get the right answer, you're a racist. If you ask your math kids to show their work, which is the definition of math, you're a racist. How about this? The concept of math being objective is false, and upholding the idea that there are right and wrong answers perpetuates racial objectivity. Simply suggesting to children that there are right and wrong answers is now white supremacy. And listen to this. This teacher guides that respect for the written word is also a hallmark of white supremacy. So if you believe that high school kids should be able to read and write, you're a bigot. Not reading and writing is morally superior to reading because you're rebelling against white supremacy. Do you see, please, what I'm telling you? This has nothing to do with race. This is 100% globalist, socialist nonsense. Move forward. This is a classic example of what I'm telling you. Here's a math test, an actual critical race math test. It's an algebra test for 9th graders, freshmen in high school. And if you can take a look at the image, the first thing you see on the test is not math. It's actually a biography of a black activist. You get a 4 or 5 sentence paragraph about the poet Maya Angelou, black poet. So when you go to the actual math, and we can do a close-up here, when you get to the actual math, there's your math question. Y equals x plus 2, 3x times 6y equals 12. If you don't know the answer to the math, all you have to do is go back to the first page, read the biography right there on your test, and answer the question. Angelou was sexually abused by her mother's boyfriend at the age of 8. All you have to do to get that information is flip it over and read it. And if you get that the boyfriend did it, then you also get the right answer in math. Let me repeat that. You don't have to do any math. You don't have to know anything about the right answer. All you have to do is read those 4 sentences. And if you can actually discern from those 4 sentences what the question is asking you, you get full credit for the math test. How about this one? Thomas Sowell. What multiculturalism boils down to is that you can praise any culture in the world except Western culture. And you cannot blame any culture in the world except Western culture. 20 years ago, when multiculturalism was all the rage, when this was going down, it inevitably was going to end up with critical race theory. Had to. Because for 30 years, we did multicultural education. And that basically says that all the problems in the world are Western problems. We must only teach the problems and how the West is evil. But when it comes to countries like China or Saudi Arabia or a dozen other countries who are significant, right now, not 200 years ago, are morally bankrupt, you can't criticize those non-Western cultures because they're not white. White people can't criticize non-white people. So the whole premise of multiculturalism, starting back in the mid-1970s, was critical race theory, a version of critical race theory. Bad, America and the West is bad, and we can't praise it. Non-Western cultures that are evil must be praised. Sowell is 100% right, and I want you to see the origins go back deep of this critical race theory. How about this? We have the National Council of Teachers of English. This is the organization that has a huge hand in deciding how your kids' English classes will look in the public schools moving forward. Here's what the NCTE, the National Council of Teachers of English, had to say last year. Quote, the National Council of Teachers of English declare that reading books and writing essays is overrated and it's time to decenter, to remove those activities. They're not important. In English class, it is not important that your kids read and write. That is a secondary skill. Notice the next bullet point. What are we going to replace reading and writing with? The new emphasis is and will be digital media and pop culture. And the new focus will be to address inequality. So, I have another talk that we'll do sometime soon on the sexuality education that your kids are getting. This is part of it, right? Notice what they're telling you. Instead of reading books, great books, important books, the books that gave us freedom and liberty, you're going to now study popular culture, rap and Taylor Swift videos. And the whole purpose of this is not to read, it's to watch. And then the whole point is going to be point to the racists, identify the racism. That's what's going to be, is already happening and will continue to happen to your kids' English class. Reading and writing out, watching pop culture, and becoming CRT warriors, that's the future. And this is what happens to children, black children, when the left does this. White liberals, when white liberal progressives who can owned education for 70 years, with all this garbage that's we have to do all this stuff, ignore math because it hurts black kids, minority kids. Here's what actually happens in schools. This is a Baltimore high school, primarily black school, overwhelmingly black. Listen to the consequence of this kind of education for those African American kids.
In reading, 628 Patterson High School students took the test. 484 of them, or 77%, tested at an elementary school reading level. That includes 71 high school students who are reading at a kindergarten level and 88 students reading at a first grade level. Another 45 are reading at a second grade level. Just 12 students tested at Patterson High School were reading at grade level. That comes out to less than 2%.
77% of those kids at junior and level cannot read. Do you understand when over 200 of those kids are reading at a first or second, kindergarten or first grade level? They're not reading at all. If you have a kindergarten reading level, you don't know how to read. Kindergarten kids don't. First graders don't. A huge percentage of those kids, high school kids, graduating kids, read like how to read like kindergarten kids, in order to say they don't. But you know the funny thing? Despite 77%, despite the fact that only 1.2% of those kids can read at grade level, let that sink in. Only 1.2% of all those kids read at grade level, and most don't even read at all. Every one of those kids got their diplomas. Not one of those kids was held back. Not one of those kids failed. Not one of those kids had to repeat a grade. They're high school graduates now with that level, and they've been in school since they were 5 years old. 17, 18 now, graduated from college. Can't read. They got their diplomas. This is critical race theory in action. You move a little forward. Our friend Thomas Sowell one more time. Activism is a way, this kind of progressive left-wing garbage socialist activism. Activism is a way for useless people to feel important, even if the consequences of their activism are counterproductive for those they claim to be helping and damaging to the fabric of science, society as a whole. Is that not what we just showed you? These zealous liberal revolutionaries who are doing it for the children. They're more interested in their own vanity, their virtue signaling, than they are helping people. And what they're doing is, we just saw it in Baltimore, making everything worse for the very people they claim to care about. That is what your progressive liberal people are doing. This is an actual college classroom for first and second year students. 800 kids, Penn State University. Listen to the way the professor talks to the children, the kids, I should say, they're young adults, talks to them about race. This is what the entire class gets funneled, a freshman class gets funneled through classes like courses. Listen to how this professor behaves.
So, bro, how's it feel knowing that push comes to shove, like your skin's kind of nice?
I don't know. I mean, it makes me feel like sad because, like, God knows I don't deserve it. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't choose to be white, so like, you know what I mean? Like, it makes me upset that, like, you know, my brothers and sisters of like other races can't like experience those things for something that I didn't like you know, I didn't do anything to like deserve that. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know, it just makes me upset.
So this is the problem with white people. The question then becomes is what should we do?
So listen to that. A professor actually bullies a young white kid to condemn his own race. I didn't ask to be born white, literally. Standing next to an African-American kid. Notice that the professor is white, male, and tenured, right? Can't be fired. Tell me that's not white privilege right there, the progressive white privilege. This guy is lecturing, bullying white kids into condemning their own race. And then did you hear what he said? First of all, the kid says basically, everything I achieve in my life will be illicit. It will be invalid because it all happens simply because I'm white. However hard I work, however much I scrimp and save, however much creativity I have, none of it matters anymore because I'm white. And then the stunning thing, after groveling in the racial dust, this young man, the professor says, this is the problem with white people. Seriously, the kid did everything you asked him to do. He surrendered. He became a racist against himself, which is what you want. And your response is, this is the problem with white people. The question is, what are we going to do about it? This is why you never surrender to these people. You never pretend, well, we have had a bad racial history, Dr. Pesta, so maybe we should No. The minute you surrender, you are surrendering the country and its values, not just your opinion. You move a little forward. This one blows me away. It's a audio recording of a white male history teacher lecturing a young black student, male student. Listen to the hypocrisy here. The high school teacher put this image that you're seeing there, those two young girls back to back, and invited people to comment on it. By the way, how does that work? How is that intellectual work? You put a picture on the board, and then you invite people to comment about the picture. Well, here's how that conversation went.
Tell me what this seems to be a picture of.
It's just two people chilling.
Right, just two people. There's nothing more to this picture?
Nah, not really. Just two people chilling.
I don't believe that you believe that. I don't believe that you look at this as just two people. I think you're being intentionally coy about what this is a picture of.
What would I be being coy about? It's two people standing back to back in a picture.
Yeah, and that's all you see is two people.
I'm confused on what you would like me to speak on in that
I don't think you are. I'm not trying to call you out, but you come out off of mute to talk about what this is a picture of, and you act as if there's nothing noticeable about this apart from the two people.
Well, I'm confused. Are you trying to get me to say that there are two different races in this picture?
Yes,
is that what you want me to say? Well, at the end of the day, wouldn't that just be feeding into the problem of looking at race instead of just acknowledging them as two normal people?
You can't look at the people and not acknowledge that there are racial differences, right?
But if we're going for, let's say if we're looking for equality within all this, then why would we need to point out things such as that?
Because those differences are real things.
Did you hear the hectoring of the white male teacher, browbeating that African-American kid? That kid was right. Why do you want me to see race in this, he says. Isn't that feeding the problem of racism? Isn't that what's wrong with racism? And that white male high school teacher is bullying that kid. I'm not going to be done with you until you see what I see. You see a white girl and a black girl, and that means discrimination. That's literally the point of this exercise. When you see black and white, you see white oppression, you see black victimhood. And here's the great big kick in the pants. God has a mighty sense of humor, because these two girls are actually sisters, biological sisters. Same mom, same dad. So the irony that obviously the high school teacher didn't know that. The irony here of this is that his own argument is defeated by the picture he chose. This is much more, it has nothing to do with race, ultimately. And how bad is it? We talked to see Dr. Sowell again, right? Have we reached the ultimate stage of absurdity, where some people are held responsible for the things that happened before they were born, while other people are not held responsible for what they themselves are doing today? Is that not the situation? African-American Thomas Sowell tells you, if you think about what he's telling you, we hold all white people responsible for what happened hundreds of years ago in this country, or thousands even. And yet, when it comes to people in the freest country in the history of the world who do not choose to succeed, do not take their education seriously, who don't graduate, don't want to go to school, of any color, they're the victims. One last time, that clip. Have we? I think the answer is rhetorical. We have. We've reached the point of absolute absurdity where we hold responsible for the things that never happened, those people, one group of people, while other people are not actually held responsible for the evil things they do. Are we holding China for its active slavery, its incarceration of people who have different religions? Are we holding them accountable? No, we apologize for the Chinese. On the other hand, America, who dealt with and ended slavery with a brutal war and got rid of segregation in civil rights legislation, now are still responsible years later for what happened before. This is the absurdity. And how bad is this? I want to show you, this guy is an advocate. This guy is part of an organization that trains your public school teachers how to teach. His company, it's called Equity Collab, like as an equity collaborative. Right? And by the way, when you hear the word collaborative, think socialism. This guy is a member of the Equity Collab, and this group gets paid $500,000 to train teachers to apply critical race theory in high school. This is going to blow your mind because it's coming right from the mouth of the CRT proponents and teachers. Here's telling you what the purpose of high school today is.
And the thing that I think we offer, because I certainly don't think we offer learning per se, I think what we offer are relationship. I think what we offer better, because the learning part in terms of information, what historically high schools were for was dissemination of information very quickly. It organized information to disseminate it. Well, actually the internet's better than the high school is. It's faster, it's got first person, you can do interviews, you got video. You're like, truthfully, the teacher in relation to dissemination of information is obsolete. But the teacher in relationship to relationship is the thing.
Seriously. Did you hear what he said? He said, we don't do learning in school. That's not our job. If you want to educate your kids, if you want high school, these are high school teachers, you want your high school kids to learn, send them to the internet. Seriously. If I'm a mom listening to this, I say, give me back 16 years of my property taxes that went to these worthless schools. Give it back to me. You owe me that. Because if all I got to do is educate my kid, is turn the internet on in his bedroom and let him learn to teach himself, because that's what this clown just said. We don't do learning. Teaching in high school is obsolete. What do we replace all that math and science with? And reading. We replace it with relationships. That is one of the groomiest things you are ever going to hear. Our job as teachers is to cozy up to your kids, to turn them into our best friends, to make sure that we have more moral authority over your kid than the mom and dad, to separate you from their families. Our job is to become their buddies and pat them on the back and tell them sex in 6th grade is wonderful, show them how to do anal sex in the classrooms, right? This is our jobs, is to convince middle schoolers that they are not the body and the gender that they were born into. That's what our job is. I mean, you heard it directly from him, and it gets worse. Listen to this.
Adults, to change adults, sometimes I wonder whether it's even worth it. Sometimes you're like, you know what, forget it. They should just get out of the way. We should get out of the way, let kids, because kids are faster. They'll change much faster. Adults are in the way.
The purpose of education is change. My gosh, we've said it a lot. Radical change. It's not education. Education, math, science, reading, it's in the way. The more math your kid knows, the more science he knows, the more he can read or she can read and write, the less they will buy this indoctrination. It is as clear as day. Parents got to get out of the way. Teachers got to get out of the way. Let the children change. Reject their gender. Become bi and gay and trans. Make them wards of the environmental state. Teach them to be terrified of the world around them. Nothing means anything. Nothing's objective except our politics. This is radical, far-reaching ideological indoctrination that they're perpetrating on your kids in a very, very creepy, sexual grooming way, right? Here's a young man who was a teacher in the Indiana schools who, at the time he made this video calling out critical race theory in the sciences, lost his job. Listen to how he lays out how critical race theory in the classroom works.
I'm the science coach and admin in the largest public school district in Indiana. I'm in dozens of classrooms a week, so I see exactly what we're teaching our students. When we tell you that schools aren't teaching critical race theory, that it's nowhere in our standards, that's misdirection. We don't have the quotes and theories as state standards per se. We do have critical race theory in how we teach. We tell our teachers to treat students differently based on color. We tell our students that every problem is a result of white men, and that everything Western civilization built is racist. Capitalism as a tool of white supremacy. Those are straight out of Kimberly Crenshaw's main points, verbatim in Critical Race Theory, the writings that formed the movement. This is in math, history, science, English, the arts, and it's not slowing down. If students of color have lower reading scores, it's because of inequity. Therefore, we take from the white students and give to the colored students. That's Richard Delgado, straight out of CRT and Introduction. All teaching is political, with reality and facts taking the back seat. That's Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, who outlined how she saw critical race theory fleshed out in public schools in 1995. When schools tell you that we aren't teaching critical race theory, it means one thing. Go away and look into our affairs no further. It isn't about transparency, it isn't about cultural relevance. It's race essentialism, painted to look like the district cares about students of color. We call it anti-racism, so you feel bad if you disagree with our segregationist pedagogy. It's taking advantage of kids' vulnerability and parents' inactivity to preen over social snake oil schemes designed to create division. Parents, when we tell you critical race theory isn't taught in our schools, we're lying. Keep looking.
Yeah, and that's in the hard sciences, chemistry, biology. That's where he sees critical race theory on a daily basis before they fired him. His argument here is irrefutable. What he's telling you is, we're lying to you about how much critical race theory is in the schools. We're lying to you by not telling you the way we're forcing your children to change alternative pronouns, to doubt their very biological makeup. They're lying to you, and they're not educating your kids. Badly, poorly, not at all to prepare them from college, from life, anything. And they're using all that class time and all your public school money. They're using it exclusively to turn your kids into the same monsters of ignorance and chauvinism and arrogance that they are. One more time with Professor Sowell. Quote, more whites were brought as slaves to North Africa than blacks were brought as slaves to the United States or to the 13 colonies from which it was formed. White slaves were still being bought and sold in the Turkish Ottoman Empire decades after blacks were freed in the United States. That is a painful truth, but it is a truth. There have been more white slaves over the last 2,000 years than black ones. This does not apologize for American slavery. This does not excuse it. But if our kids understood the reality of slavery in the world and what slavery that really exists in the world today is not in Western culture, if they understood that, they could process the evil of slavery globally and across races and cultures and get a better sense of how that worked. But we don't want that. We want them to believe that it's only African Americans and it's only Americans and it's who did it, and it's only Western culture that had it, and that they want your kids to believe that it is bad now as it ever has been, or it's worse today. That's what they're doing in the public schools. I'm going to give the final video to a man who I have great respect for, talking at a school board. Listen to this.
The last name is Amanchukwu.
Thank you very much for correcting me, Mr. Amanchukwu.
Yes, no problem. It means I know God. Luke chapter 17:2 says that it's better for a person to have a millstone tied around their neck and to be thrown into the sea than for anyone to harm or damage a child. And so the question today to the school board is, only you know whether or not your role, the policies, the curriculum, and the things that you allow in this school system in Wake County, only you know whether or not a millstone is tied around your neck. The reality is this: God is going to judge every last one of you for decisions that are made on behalf of children. You know, this past year we spent $1 million on a diversity office. And how did that benefit black children? How did it benefit children in general? Well, 78% of 3rd through 8th grade black students are not proficient in math in Wake County. We're wasting taxpayer dollars putting money towards this diversity office that's not benefiting those who need it the most. 66% of 3rd through 8th grade students are not proficient in reading. Black students, they're not reading on grade level. They're not performing mathematically, and they're not going to be able to get jobs in the fields like STEM. But we're wasting money on a diversity, equity, and inclusion office while we are failing black students in the name of diversity. You know, in the Jim Crow era, black students were locked out of the public school system. But today they are trapped in. And many of these students need options. They need school choice. They need the opportunity to take their taxpayer dollars and take it to school systems that will benefit them and support them and educate them. And as we talk about inclusion and making sure that the trans student feels comfortable and the queer student feels comfortable, what does that have to do with reading, writing, and arithmetic? As we are teaching cultural Marxism and grooming children to be the next pervert, we are damaging our kids in this public school system, and it needs to stop.
I love the fact that his name means I know God. And the other thing I would say about his commentary at the end there, it's powerful. There was a time when African American kids, minority kids, were frozen out of schools. It was a horrible time. And yet, what's worse than trapping these minority kids in schools that don't teach them, that don't educate them, that don't prepare them for life, college, or career, that make them virtual wards of the state forever? What's worse? I would suggest not attending school would be less damaging, as this man suggests, than being trapped in the public schools. You have one choice, people. They're not going to change anytime soon. Simply changing the personnel and the politics of the school boards isn't going to fix this. Teachers are being trained to teach this way. Publishers of books are creating only textbooks that do this. Colleges are already completely committed to this. The Department of Education, your state of New York education, or any other state for that matter in this country, is 100% behind this. You aren't fixing it. Millstones. You get your kids out, because in the end, the person most responsible for your kids' education is you, mom and dad. The person most responsible for your kids' health and welfare and very survival is you, mom and dad. You keep your kids in these schools knowing what you know, then the millstones are biggest, not for the school board members, not for the teachers, but for us. Thanks for watching.